So welcome to Save 2.0, Larry, Keith, and the Garage. Before we get going, I'm going to read the land acknowledgement from the University of Iowa. The University of Iowa is located on the homelands of the Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Bahoji, Iowa, Chickapew, Kickapoo, Ometmanewak, Menominee, Miamia, Miami, Natuchi, Missouri, Omaha, Omaha, Wazaji, Osage, Jiware, Oto, Ottawa, Ottawa, Ponca, Ponca, Potawatomi, Anishinaabe, Potawatomi, Meskwaki, Nemahaci, Sakawaki, Sac and Fox, 3 affiliated tribes, and Ho-Chunk Winnebago nations. The following tribal nations: Omaha Tribe of Nebraska and Iowa, the Ho-Chunk Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska nations continue to thrive in the state of Iowa, and we continue to acknowledge them. As an academic institution, it is our responsibility to acknowledge the sovereignty and the traditional territories of these tribal nations, and the treaties that were used to remove them, and the histories of dispossession that have allowed for the growth of this institution since 1847. Consistent with the university's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, understanding the historical and current experiences of Native peoples will help inform the work we do collectively as a university to engage in building relationships through academic scholarship, collaborative partnerships, community service, enrollment and retention efforts, acknowledging our past, our present, and our future Native nations. As we get started, I just want to give you a sense of what to expect this evening. So we have the performance, which is directed and choreographed by Dwayne Lee Holland and co-directed by Michelle Byrne-McPhee. After that, we'll take a short break and then reset. We'll have more seating when we have a little bit more floor room, and then we'll come back together for a discussion. Those of you who are standing, I just want to let you know that the dancers are going to be walking around the whole space. So if you are in the pathway, just kind of be aware if you're able to give them a little bit more room to get around. And if you're standing by the door, if you would just pay attention to the tape so people can get access through the door and to the welcome desk or the elevator as needed. Okay, and without further ado, here is Save 2.0, Larry, Keith, and the Garage.
Keith was that kind of all media, like all entry pass, to the world. He was going to connect every way that he could.
Sin, art boy sin, art boy sin, art boy sin, art boy sin, boy sin as sin as if sin, as if boy, art boy as if as, sin as if, sin as boy, sin boy art boy as, art as boy, art as sin, sin as boy, boy as if sin boy, as if no, as if no, as if no, sin as no, no if as, sin as lick.
The 80s for a lot of New York downtown culture was about rebellion, which is at the core of rock and roll and a lot of things that have changed America. It was about rebelling. It was about, we're gonna do this whether you like it or not.
Lick art fat, fat if no, no if art, fat.
We were young. We were all in our early 20s. We were all very interested in painting and art and music and writing and dance and theater. It was a very, very vibrant community. And at that time, anyone could really do whatever they wanted.
Lick fat boys, lick fat.
It was kind of like being in somebody's parents' house and the parents are out of town. It was like all of the adult people in power, even in the government, none of those people lived in New York City.
New York City was burned out. New York City was bankrupt. It was like a war zone. However, at the same time, Wall Street was booming. That dichotomy, I think, was what Keith was depicting. Everything was right at the right time for a recipe to make this absolute cultural flowering.
It was a key moment in the zeitgeist where uptown and downtown and the gay clubs and the straight art world all intertwined. It was an explosion of creativity that has had reverberations ever since. And Keith and Kenny were at SVA at that point. They were art students.
I had met Basquiat in '78, actually at school. He was hanging out at SVA, and we started drawing in the street together, and I introduced him actually to Keith. Everything was all at the same time. Keith was putting these Xerox posters out in the street. Jean-Michel was drawing Samo and spray painting. And then at the same time, the Times Square show happened, and when he saw all the excitement going on with, Futura and Fab Five Freddy and these artists that we met in Times Square, it was like, it just kind of exploded, like basically. It was downtown and uptown colliding, with hip hop and the art and everything.
Keith wanted to be a part of the graffiti energy at that time, but he didn't want to be a part of it. He felt very strongly like him, as this white guy, didn't want to come into doing it and take the shine and the exposure away from the young, mostly black and Latin kids that were doing it. And he had a lot of respect for wanting to find a unique way to participate. In the subways, what they would do at the time, when they didn't have a new ad to put up in the frames for advertisements, that they would put just a piece of black paper there. And what Keith found, which was so brilliant, that just with a simple piece of chalk, he can go and in that perfect black frame, make a drawing.
He had created, was his own language, semiotics, a visual language. That one's definitely about some kind of domination and submission and money. There was lots of money symbols, and he was pretty blatant about people in power subjugating the weak. And that was a very big part of, I think, the messages that he was doing.
Soho was white walls, white wine, and white people, which is okay, but it's good to have a mix of some other kind of people, because New York is full of all these different kinds of people. And in the art world, you didn't see much diversity as far as skin color. And Keith liked to see different colors of people and the energies from all these different people that make New York what it is. He became a very big supporter and fan of other graffiti artists like Crash, Daze, Lady Pink, like a real supporter and a real fan in the most sincerest way.
I mean, he was one of the first people to recognize dancers, hip-hop dancers, for example, break dancers. So when we had exhibitions, there's always those elements coming into the gallery. For hours and hours. The idea of people mixing music, that was the beginning of scratching, for example. We used to see it in the gallery always. He'd bring it forward to encourage them. He'd give them a place of stardom.
Me and the mic, so I kept on rocking till I got the crowd. I traveled near and I traveled far, from coast to coast. I became a star. I was a disco talent, and I stopped rapping. Fingers stepping, foot stopping, toe tapping. One of a kind, with 1,000 rocks.
The same thing would, in fact, rap music, as they used to call it that time, which evolved into hip hop. So he got to know all the groups, for example. He got to be very good friends. Run DMC, for example, or Public Enemy, for example. And he did album covers, he did murals for schools, etc. So this engagement with the culture outside was very live.
His art was very much about movement. The line did not stand still. Even though it's a static piece on a canvas in 2 dimensions, it is very much alive, and it's very, very much about movement.
It was always dynamic and always immediate. There is no preparation, there is no postponement, so hence he was fearless. That is why he never needed any preparatory notes, drawings, ideas written down, never used an eraser, no mistakes. The moment was now, always now.
I was the first person to take Keith to the Paradise Garage, which became a big part of his life. I had been a few times before. Although it was mostly a gay club, Friday nights were open to straight as well as gay, which was the night that I mostly went. Keith had heard about the club, wanted to go. I took him, we got in. He was so excited. And later that week, he had got a meeting with Michael Brody, who was one of the owners, and had a meeting and told him who he was and what he was doing with his art and how he wanted to just bring his work into the club and be a part of the whole garage excitement. And within no time, he was. Where his work was decorating the club, and I remember the first big performance Grace Jones had, Keith body painted Grace, created an amazing elaborate headdress. I went with Jean-Michel that night. We were up in the DJ booth smoking big joints of incredible weed, as Jean-Michel would always do, would roll up and light up anywhere. And Keith was a big star, and we were able to be in the VIP booth, which was Larry's DJ booth, Larry Levan, who's the great DJ of dance music.
He loved DJs, loved music. He loved Larry Levan. Oh my goodness. And Larry Levan to me is like a DJ god.
The DJ was Larry Levan, who was one of the first DJs in New York to bring house music. And Keith loved that club. And it was a hypersexual place because people would drop ecstasy and dance all night.
His freedom. He would just let loose. Juan, completely opposite. His lover, complete opposite. He'd be in the booth, he'd be next to Larry, but Keith would be out there like an angel, all over the place. Not one spot in the room, all over the place. Soaking wet from sweat, just soaking wet, hour after hour.
A fun memory was how wonderful it was to go dancing with him at the Paradise Garage. And it was almost a religious experience there because the people and the music and the space, something happened and it was really special. And the only reason we could go in on Friday night when it was the gay night was thanks to Keith.
And that was the relief, the inspiration, the camaraderie to be around like-minded people, The most beautiful thing about the garage was that it was gay, straight, black, white, young, old, rich, poor, people who loved to dance.
He just, was an artist that really looked at club culture and really took that and incorporated in his art with all the movement as well as that DJ thing with the two turntables. When I saw it, I just was like so touched, and I thought it was beautiful.
So we've got some time here for discussion with Dwayne and Michelle, and there'll be some time at the end too for questions that you may have. We'll get started I'll introduce them. I'll read a little bit more about their bios and the work that they've done. We've got some questions for them about their project here and the trajectory of their careers, and then we'll open it up for questions. So Michelle Bird McPhee was a 2023 Bessie Award winner for Outstanding Service to the Field. She's a street dancer, an arts activist, and tireless advocate for girls and women who work to decolonize hip-hop culture along gender, sex, and cultural and socio-historical racial lines. With a BS from Temple University and an MS from Drexel University, Bird McPhee has worked in different sectors of the entertainment industry, having been a production coordinator at the Brooklyn Academy of Music and a senior music coordinator for Late Night with Seth Meyers. Awarded the 2020 Integrated Arts Residency Fellowship at University of Wisconsin-Madison, Bird McPhee created and taught her course Hip Hop, Women in the World. Bird McPhee has also served as a grant panelist for the prestigious McKnight Foundation, Dance NYC, and served as a voting member of the Bessie Award Committee. Presently, Bird McPhee continues her 20-year commitment as Executive Director for Ladies of Hip Hop and Artistic Director of LDC, Ladies of Hip Hop Dance Collective. Dwayne Lee Holland Jr. is, oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Dwayne Lee Holland Jr. is an associate professor of dance. Holland began his professional dance career at the age of 17, dancing for the first hip-hop theater dance company, Rennie Harris Pure Movement, and was later named Assistant Artistic Director of the company. He received his Master's of Fine Arts in Dance, magna cum laude, with a focus in choreography from the University of Iowa. Throughout his career, Holland has been a pioneer of bringing hip-hop to college dance programs. He became the first full-time hip-hop professor at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley in 2016 and at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2019. The University of Massachusetts Amherst Dance Program welcomed him as a new faculty member in the fall of 2022. Holland has had the privilege of working with choreographers Bill T. Jones, Garth Fagan, Ronald K. Brown. He was also assistant choreography, dance captain, and featured dancer in Maurice Hines' Broadway production of Hot Feet. In 2010, he released his first independent R&B hip-hop music project, Life Expansion, and his second project, Love and Life, featuring songs from his one-man show, The Adventures of Max Lancaster, was released in March 2021. For many years, Holland has been conducting community outreach programs with his arts and education organization, Crave the Harvest, in the suburban Philadelphia area, as well as in conjunction with select universities across the nation. We're honored to have both Dwayne and Michelle with us tonight, and that they've been here all week working with dance students. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got to where you are in your careers?
I'll take that. I took the curviest, bumpiest, the road with the most roadblocks ever. I don't know if I ever envisioned that I would be doing what I'm doing. I knew this is what I was supposed to be doing. And because I had started this work, so Ladies of Hip Hop was founded 20 years ago this year, but I used to have another company, Montage Performing Arts Company, that I've founded in the 90s or the 1900s, as y'all say. And so I've been doing this work of advocacy for women. I used to be a social worker doing welfare to work as a counselor, and then I did women making the transition from shelters to what back then was called HUD housing. So I've always wanted to work around and for women's issues and to empower women. And I grew up dancing with my family, my aunts, my uncles, my mom. And so music and dance was always a part of my life, but because of the circumstances, my mom was a single mother, 4 kids. It just, dance classes weren't happening. I just didn't have access. And although I grew up dancing, I was in every talent show and all of those things, a path to getting a dance degree was just not there for me. So I did the next best thing to be in service, which was to be a social worker. And then as I did that and decided to grow up and stop dancing, stop hanging out in clubs, I started booking all these dance gigs. So, so then dance kind of took over my life. That's when I founded Montage, co-founded that with Crystal Frazier, who is also, hello, somebody know Crystal. Also a family friend of ours from Philadelphia. But, you know, I think all along the way I was told that I couldn't do. My high school counselor said, what are we going to do with you? Because you're definitely not going to college. Because I didn't have college prep classes, any of that kind of stuff. I wish I could just, you know, kind of slap him in the face right now. But no violence. But for real, you know, like I just was told like things weren't going to happen. Even when I founded Laser Hip Hop, and I would try and do events and have events in different venues and things, folks would always be like, no one wants to come see women do hip hop. You know, and so I say, you know, it was nothing but me knowing that the work that I was doing was important, at least enough to me and my friends in my community, that kind of has led me here on this path. And what I did was just take every job that could keep me close to the arts. So I couldn't get my master's is in arts admin. And I couldn't get a job in 2001 when I graduated from Drexel. And so I got a job as a production manager and learned the back end, you know, so I can take a blank space from zero to a full production. I've worked on operas, I've worked on film festivals, everything. And I can't tell you how every single job that I've had has led me to this space and really has built the skills that I have to like lead a small arts organization. Because that's the hardest job in the world.
Thank you all for coming out this evening. Started out as a gymnast, trained for the 92 and 96 Olympics, got injured the year of the 96 Olympics, started dancing. At 14, I was dancing behind Chaka Khan and Kool and the Gang while still training for the Olympics. My coach didn't like me dancing, so I had to kind of sneak to do it. So I danced at this studio in my hometown, but the woman that owned the studio was really good friends with Frank Hatchett, who is a jazz pioneer himself, but he originated Broadway Dance Center. He just took me in, and my life expanded. I went to Creative and Performing Arts High School. By the time I turned 17, I met Rennie Harris, and he was just starting this dance company, and I became one of the original members of Rennie Harris Pure Movement, and I started my professional career. And I was able to teach at a lot of the schools that we would go to. And I wasn't, you know, I'm 5'4", so I didn't necessarily think that I would have a chance to do any type of Broadway work just because aesthetically I didn't fit that model. But I had the opportunity to do this R&B production of Alice in Wonderland that Gregory Hines' brother Maurice Hines was doing. And my mentor at the time, Leon Evans, who is the founder of Leja, which then eventually became Elion Dance Theater, introduced me to Maurice. He took me on. While doing this show, it was full of other Black Broadway artists who were extremely encouraging and told me to go back to New York because there was this new show that was starting, Lion King, and you should audition for it. So I went back and, you know, I auditioned for Ronald K. Brown first, got into the company. The next day I went and auditioned for Lion King and I got the job as well. But I had to wait until my contract was finished with Ron to then be able to do Lion King, and being a part of the original cast of Lion King really shifted the opportunities that I thought I could have. Went from there, moved to LA. I was in a singing group and did the LA thing and realized that that is not me at all. So moved back to New York and had the opportunity to be the assistant choreographer for Hot Feet, which was a show with Earth, Wind, and Fire. And the lead in the show was Debbie Allen's daughter, Vivian Nixon. So it was an amazing experience. I thought my career was going to take off, and I got injured doing the show.
So moved back home, and I started adjuncting at Temple University, Montgomery County College, and Ursinus College, and really enjoyed doing that, and brought that the exposure of doing arts ed and really cultivating that type of infrastructure back to Rennie, and presented that to him, and he allowed me to become the associate director of the company, which is where I started Crave. And my partner and I would go to Martin Luther King High School in North Philadelphia and do different types of programs to basically let young black people know how we've always been economic drivers, how we've always been at the space of being healers. And most of those young kids were then able to go to college from that. Really was enjoying teaching in higher education, but I didn't go to undergrad. And my friend Meredith Lyons, who was the chair of Ursinus at the time, introduced me to Jennifer Kale. And I was able to come out here and meet Rebecca Kowal when I auditioned for the program. They took me in, and once again my life shifted into a whole nother space of higher education. And I was still able to kind of go back and forth as a professional artist and working in the space, and being able to do that, to then bring in Michelle and another artist, Why Not, which is during her fellowship, we really started to create infrastructure that would be successful for the continuum of Black American artistry, because currently that doesn't exist. So we were also able to locate the fact that Black American artistry is naturally interdisciplinary. So we were seeing how, African American scholarship and literature and movement and music, we were really generating a very rich space of research. And that's really how we got here.
Yeah. Thank you. As you're both talking about how you've gotten to this place, the role of community, the sense of giving back to your communities, bringing people together in new spaces, uplifting each other, I can see a lot of parallels in the video that you put together, and also in the exhibition upstairs where Keith Haring's going to communities. Horn was just one of the elementary schools, one of the communities that he worked with. Every project that he went around the world doing, he tried to work with the community and do a public project. How did you first kind of become aware of Keith Haring? Where did he kind of show up for you?
I grew up in Devon, Pennsylvania, which is 2 hours from Kutztown, which is where he's from. And my sister's 10 years older than me, and she was a visual artist. And I'm an MTV kid. I was like the weird gymnast kid in school, so I had a lot of time by myself. So I would like to watch musicals and videos, and at the time the Red Hot and Blue campaign was happening, which was the AIDS campaign, and that's really where I was seeing his work. And it wasn't until high school that I realized the correlation between the club and what he was doing, but also the fact that, this white man from Kutztown, which is Lancaster, which is, Amish people, which is, they wouldn't even think they don't have electricity. So this man, to be able to go into Philadelphia and be inspired by these brown and black people to create this work, I thought was really special. And also for myself, coming into realizing that I'm a gay hip hop artist and figuring out creating spaces for people to be seen as their whole selves. So that's also what I was experiencing as an artist, working with these different artists. For example, I was dancing in Ronald K. Brown's company, and I had no idea that they were a company that was for LGBTQ, advocacy. But it was through that and that I realized I need to revisit him. So while I was here at school, most of the work that I did, I purposely didn't do hip hop work, because I also wanted people to be introduced to the depth and range of the black male body, and letting people know that, I was able to embody Eurocentric form through being a hip hop artist. And I felt that the same type of pioneering that I was doing, I connected to what Keith was doing. But I also realized that he was being innovated or being liberated by Black American queerness. So it also allowed me to continue to show up for myself. And then, you know, being a hip hop artist and going to predominantly white institutions, people would create distance from, you know, it's a nice thing to do, but it is not my responsibility. So I started to use his life as a way to make people accountable for how they were showing up in space and how they were consuming this continuum of innovation, ingenuity, freedom in a space where clearly systems are for people not to thrive. So I used him as a way to generate community here, but also in a larger scale of the conversation of hip hop within higher education.
And thinking about kind of the emergence of hip hop culture in New York and the East Coast, that has informed Keith's work, and I think Fab Five Freddy in the video, the way he acknowledged that Herring was interested in it, but he wasn't trying to appropriate it. You know, how do you see that culture that originated in the early 80s, late 70s in New York City? How do you see it kind of continuing to influence and inform the work that you do?
Well, there was a sense of freedom that they had, but the freedom was generated through their community. No one was judging each other. Everybody was pouring into each other for them to show up as themselves. And I think in a digital world that we're in right now, where it creates space between people, it's important for us to be able to return to a person like Keith Haring or Michelle Basquiat, or, you know, these people that were utilizing art as a way to not only solidify their own purpose, but once again, making people accountable for how they're holding space. And knowing that hip hop culture was coming from people that were oppressed, people that didn't have a chance to be seen or heard. So the fact that this white man was being inspired by that to a point that he even made space in his work to show that, yes, there are systems that are pushing these people down that have been the foundation of not only this country, but others, and the liberation of not only other Black bodies, but bodies in a universal sense. So the people from that club scene were really people that, you know, generated the fact that artists are the ones that save the world, not necessarily politicians. So, yeah.
Yeah, and as you have done your work with Crave, I'd love to hear more about how both of you are creating spaces for liberation and community within your work.
Well, for me, again, women have always been at the center of my work, but I think one thing that it took some time for me to grow into was really embracing my fullness as a Black woman, really starting to create work specifically for Black women in street dance. You know, we often disappear in the things that we have been part of innovating. And so for me, I think it's some growth in recognition that I have to, you know, say the quiet things out loud to hold people accountable for, I think, some erasure for sure, you know, miscoding, whether intentional or accidental. You know, we have to let people know what we've created and continue to innovate. I think the challenge, you know, in any of this stuff that comes from, you know, communities, comes from neighborhoods, is to make sure that they are getting credit for the work and they're being recognized. I think, you know, because of the way information moves so quickly now, that, you know, we're like watching culture become pop culture, become a commodity, and then be sold back to the people who created it, as if we don't know, you know, and as if we don't have any right to say anything about it, or even often things that we have been policed for, you know, become popular culture and then, you know, renamed, miscredited. And so I think at this journey in my life, those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in doing. So almost going back to the work that people of that era and generation were doing. Because I think one thing that was very clear through, all of the interviews in the film is that, people were aware. They were aware of culture. They were aware, and it was okay to be different. It was like a utopia of where all these different people could exist, as opposed to now where, people love saying to me, I don't see color. And I'm like, well, get glasses, because I'm definitely black. You know what I'm saying? And that's okay. We have to be okay with being different. And I think those are the when I look at stuff like this, because, I'm not old enough to have hung out there. They're a little bit older than me, but I think, just even remembering where I was at that point in my life, those are the things that I miss. I've always had a very diverse community. I grew up in terms of, having all different types of friends. My mom never batted an eye, so for me, it's very normal. She also had a hair salon the whole time that I grew up, so we had a trans nail technician, when in the 80s, like my mom was just that person. She was that girl, and this was just all regular. I mean, you were in the beauty industry. This is, I went, my first club I went to with her was this place called the Limelight. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I was 15 and we were going to this hair show in New York that was called the American Beauty Show, ABS. And they always had these like wild after parties. So I went to 42nd Street and got a fake ID, and it was terrible. I wish I had hung on to it, because I don't even know how I got into this club. And I went into this club at 15, and at that moment, I knew like, this has to be part of my life forever. I don't drink. I've never drank. I've never smoked. I've never been drunk, but I am definitely high off of community and the music and just being in a space with so many different people. That's what always interested me about club culture in particular, and so, yeah, I think looking at this just gives me like kind of that connection to know that I'm still doing the right work, and that, this is in me, it's embodied, it's part of my life, it's who I am.
Just to add to that, I met Michelle. Well, Michelle was kind of like the fly girl that would be in the club. I was 15, so she would always be in the center and like flanked by these other two fly girls, whatever it was, right? And they were the ones that took the people out, men, women in the club. Like they just, so I say that to say what we're speaking of in reference to this continuum of specifically of these people from the 70s and 80s who were inspired by Black American artistry. We have to understand that going back to when Black bodies were being transported here from the continent, they were coming here with an embodied intellectual property of understanding how to utilize music and dance as a unit and community and spirituality to arrive at a healing surviving tool. And these people within this community in the 70s and 80s, it seems like that's they were naturally doing that. They didn't necessarily have to identify it or give it language or any of that. They were literally living it. And that is the type of energy that I felt going to a Pulsations, a Breakers, a Fluid. These are all clubs that would be in Philly. And it saved me. I, as a gymnast and being one of the first Black gymnasts, along with Dominique Dawes and Joyce Wilborn, there wasn't a lot of Black gymnasts in the sport at the time. So now to see that happening and to know that I was a part of that as well, but it's once again going back to community, to be able to locate yourself and making sure that you're accountable for generating that type of momentum. So also highlighting the significance of intergenerational exchange and always being able to have elders around you to help you understand that you're a part of something bigger than yourself, and that you're just continuing on a certain type of wealth. And that is something that I was able to locate within club culture, but also Baba Chuck Davis was really the one that took Rennie Harris pure movement to the next level. But Baba Chuck Davis brought African dance to the United States along with Catherine Dunham. You know, so once again, community, being able to be in the room with older people to once again let you know what your purpose is. So that was just reinforced. It just, every time I went to the club, every time I went to rehearsal, I would drive down, when I was doing Lion King, I would drive down and go to rehearsal with Montage and then drive back to do the show that day. Like this, but I did that because I needed that. You know, yes, it was a blessing to be on Broadway. I do not take that away, especially that show in and of itself. But I had to go home to get poured back into to do the show, the 8 shows for the following week. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a great way to think about the care that's needed to keep communities going and to keep yourself going as an artist, both the kind of the physical care to keep your body going and avoid injury, but also just the kind of psychic, spiritual care to be able to stay in it. How do you convey that to your colleagues, to your students, and how do you do that for yourselves?
Well, currently in the process, you know, battles are a big thing right now. And, you know, being in discussion with certain people, a lot of people don't understand that battling came from the fellowship of people being in the club. And you know, so you're talking about ritual and play, okay? So there's serious play and there's playful play. So everybody's in the club playing. Some people felt that that conversation needed to go a little further. So that exchange started to happen. But people that were witnessing that type of joy wanted to just take the joy and make that the feature, but not understanding that it was them being amongst the fellowship to then locate themselves in the legacy and the lineage that they're in to arrive at something like that. And that's difficult for a lot of people because there's a reckoning that is involved in that type of location. So, you know, I just feel that being able to be able to work with Michelle, knowing her for however many years I've known her, it's like conjuring, it's like our ancestral assignment. Alexis Gum, who actually a friend of mine, who is my other dance sister, Jennifer Harge, who also went to this program, she introduced me to Alexis Gums. And this concept of ancestral assignment is how we generate and conjure our ancestors into this space, you know, and being able to understand that, yes, we are of the diaspora. And once again, Michelle, the love that she provides to me specifically is just, she's constantly challenging me to expand and clear and create a space of clarity and being concise, right? So being able to be in this moment of higher education and create a community of really what it is, and introducing that type of investigation in a space that is built off a Eurocentric form to then bring, and silos and individuals, we are making it very clear, if you want to have this type of intellectual property in these spaces, you have to generate and curate infrastructure for success. And that's only going to come from being able to bring people that have already identified themselves in these spaces to then come together and build up and out.
Michelle, how have you brought some of those ideas into your work and all the different spheres that you've been in?
I think again, I think of this proverb Sankofa, going back to get what was there before in order to inform your future, or inform the now. And you know, I definitely value, my elders. The issue for me is there aren't a lot of women who are my age or even older who are still around in street dance. And so what I'm trying to do with the work that I'm doing is not only, credit people for what they have contributed, but also to start to document and archive the stories of the women who are here now. And I really work to bring different generations together. I have dancers who I danced with their parents in the club, and they weren't even a thought, and now they're core company members now 20 years later, who started even dancing with me at like 11, So I really have this desire to build family and community, and really continue the connections within that community and hopefully mentor them and have them pass on. I'm really at a point where I kind of want to just start to fade to the back, you know what I mean? And do some other work, some more research and some stuff that might be a little bit more self-serving, not as, community based, because it's been a long time and it's really hard when you give. And not to say it's not rewarding, but it is demanding, So, I'm hoping that those youngins, will eventually step into my shoes, or if not, Ladies of Hip Hop goes away. It's done more than I've ever thought it would do. It's been around 20 years, and I think some of the smartest people know when to walk away, so there's thoughts about that. And then I'm trying to help, the ecosystem of what we do. There's a lot of opportunities now for street dancers in concert dance, obviously in the commercial world, and also in theater. And so trying to teach professional development, offer services, get them prepared to work, teach them how to write grants, share whatever I had to kind of trip and stumble and fall through to get there, to get here, like openly and freely share that with the women who surround me, and start to get them going earlier, to understand that, life is a long thing, but we also have like a really short window to like do what we do at our highest level, and to start to think about that, and then start to think about their responsibility to pass it on to, the next generation. Because the one thing that is really special about what we do is that it is constantly changing, like constantly new dances made up every week, So there's always a new generation, and they're like 5 years old, and I'm coming for my job. So I know that it's time for me to like take a step back. But, I think I'm just really, really at a point where I gain reward from what I give, to empower each other, other folks to like, make a living doing this, And
the last question before I open it up to the audience, what's really exciting you right now about going forward? What ideas or just kind of things that you're just like seeing that get you really excited to keep going and get up tomorrow and start again?
To be honest, what'd you say?
Don't announce it.
Don't announce it. Well, the thing that is exciting me at this moment is really having opportunities like this that support the vision around infrastructure, and being able to look outside the box of what is presented as far as, like curricular or pedagogy, or like, and if it's not done in this way, then it's not necessarily valid. And I feel that if we are accepting this type of, once again, intellectual property and investigation into higher education, I feel that we need to consider new models and ways in which we come together and appreciate art and generate art making. So being in opportunities where we're dancing in, a curated space in a museum that, once again, is conjuring not only the embodiment, but also the spirit of the artists in the room. And I feel that that type of continuity is going to not only take the art somewhere, but us as humans somewhere. So that is exciting and humbling at the same time.
I think for me, I'm really excited about and starting to explore myself, you know, with some technology, because I do think that's limitless. And I think I really, you know, Black communities tend to get left out of the loop with that. And so I'm really interested in exploring some of that. So if there's any folks in here doing green screen work or any of that, you know, get at me. And I'm excited to, you know, I've started curating some things with some of the larger arts institutions. So I am excited to like not just perform in spaces, you know, because then we run the risk of just still being entertainment. And I think we have lots of things to say. I think no one knows our community better than us, so we should be curating our own events. You know, I love when folks throw hip hop events and then they don't ask anyone from the community about anything. And so I'm excited to see some of those structures kind of shift a bit. We are not there, so I don't want to, you know, I don't want to do the dance yet. But it is starting to happen. I'm excited for what's happening in higher education, but also what's happening in K through 12. There's a lot of work being done around hip hop education and K through 12. There's some initiatives that are becoming statewide in terms of bringing hip hop into the curriculum. And so I do think then what that will allow is for a different space in higher education. It won't be so foreign, you know. We won't be, you know, fighting some of the structures that we have to fight in order to for them to understand the importance of, you know, all of it, the fullness of the, you know, not just the actual steps, but, you know, being able to have lecture, you know, classes where we can lecture and discuss the culture and explain the people and explain the socioeconomic times of when that happened, you know. So I'm excited about a lot, you know, and you know, I'm excited that hip hop has been around for 50 something years. Don't yell at me. People are like, it's been 52, it's been 49, 50-ish years. And, you know, because we weren't supposed to be here, you know. So in a sense, you know, this idea of like Afrofuturism and us as Black people not only surviving but succeeding. So boom.
Thank you. Well, I'll open this up to the audience. What do you want to know from Dwayne and Michelle?
Y'all are so polite.
Don't talk over yourselves.
I'm just wondering how you two as collaborators, how your ideas kind of influence each other and the works that you kind of create together. And yeah, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
So do we. We've known each other for many years. I've known Dwayne, and I'm about 10 or 12 years older than him. But this is the first time we really had an opportunity to collaborate, and I've been really hands off because this is his master's thesis, and I'm like, I am a person who, I'm a control freak who loves to work in a group, right? So like, it's super interesting working with me because I have very clear ideas and specific things that I want to do, but I can grow in the room. I can work with people and make space, especially people that I care about. But I wanted to kind of take a back seat to him for movement and for the story. That's why when he was talking specifically about the documentary, I let him speak about it because it is his work. But he's invited me in, and I took more of a like aerial view, some direction, added my 2 cents basically. And so far we like it. We like working together. So, you know. Hopefully it'll happen again. But that's I don't know if you have, I mean, we've danced together. We both dance in the Jazz Continuum together. He's actually my partner in the Jazz Continuum. And he was one of the only company members out of Rennie Harris to come into my company and put a piece on us. And so, you know, we've had this maybe not collaborating on a project, but we've, had this working relationship for quite some time.
Yeah, and it to be in this moment for the past 5 years, because since when I got to UW-Madison, I hadn't really been in touch with Michelle. We kind of were crossing paths, but really weren't in touch with each other. But I was figuring out the landscape of academia because I thought I wanted to be at a conservatory, and quickly learned that I don't want to be there. I want to be around thinking, dancing bodies. That's a whole other thing. But when I got to UW-Madison, I wanted a very strong and rich space of male and female interaction and energy, and that is something that I know that in reference to hip hop and Black American artistry, there really wasn't a space for that. So I called her and I said, listen, I have this idea. Will you come? And she came in October, and we haven't stopped working since then. And I have I've always respected her, because I'm telling you, she would take out men in the club, it was very disrespectful, but brilliant. So, I had just a great respect for her. And then, when we would see each other, it's like, she truly is my big sister, because she would say to me, this is what you need to be doing, and then she would just disappear. So to be able to build this with her in the past 5 years, it's also allowed me to see myself and really clarify who I am and what I want to do. So I'm extremely appreciative and looking forward to the future, because it's going to be magical.
Great question.
Thank you so much for being here. I'd really love to know more about your work with the dancers, and just the sense of transference of the kind of the ethos of club culture. It's really interesting because I lived in New York around this time. I was there starting in 1986, and I went to college, and during the importance of ACT UP, and one of my friends was deeply involved. And then I moved to Soho, and I, danced and then worked in a gallery for part time so I could do my thing. The clubs were really important for all of us. It was a huge space of community and also of sort of becoming, and in a really embodied way. And I'm just wondering, how do you work with dancers when you're coming into a place like this, and you're thinking about kind of evoking or conjuring the spirit of those places and those spaces? How do you, what are ways that you help to try to get people into that physical, or that, I don't know, it's not physical, the sort of physical, spiritual, that ontology, let's put it that way, that state of being.
I'm just going to talk about the club in general. Shout out to Rebecca for going to the club. Hello. I'm just talking club in general, and I think we did talk a little bit about this with the dancers, is that, I always try and think about what was actually happening at that time, right? Even in work, I have a work where we're doing, this is not a club piece, but we're embodying Black girls, young Black girls, right? And I just couldn't understand why they weren't getting what I was trying to have happen on stage. And then what I had to do is make the reference of what was actually happening then. I said, oh, we're referencing a Black girl from 1980s. So you didn't have a phone. Phones didn't exist, computers, you didn't have access to any of that. And so I think I always talk about, the people and what, was happening in the world at that time. And I think, talking about things like ACT UP and AIDS. I had a family member, like I had a very close family member die of AIDS in the 80s as well. So for me, it was a very real thing, like I can transport myself back to that time, and so it's just really telling stories, whether it's my personal stories. So it's a little easier for me to tap into a Black girl from the 1980s. Hello. So, and we really had to sit down and talk about it and look at video and then have this idea of like for me, especially when I was going out a lot, the club was, Dwayne and I talk about this all the time, and you could talk a little bit more about this, but, club was our church, it was where, we went to when we were mad, when we were happy. So to celebrate, to really, I think it was such a unique time. Any time before, like I go out now and it just doesn't feel the same. And I know every generation says that, but it is something about knowing at any second a phone can be, turned on to record you, or is always on, or people are on their phones. It's not the same. The freedom that we had and just the ability to lose yourself in that space just does not exist anymore, So I would love to talk to you about 1986.
Yeah. There was so much loss at that time too.
Yeah.
We were like living with loss. So many dancers. Every day.
Yeah.
And my teachers would come to teach us, and they had lost their lover, their friend,
it was crazy. Yeah.
Roommate all the time. And so I don't know. There's just like a sense of survival too, and joy.
Yeah.
It was really like living on the edge in a way for a lot of folks.
Just to add to what Michelle was saying, in that when I have been able to find 3 concepts that allows me to help young artists drop into work like this, and it's context, content, and citation. So, when we got here, or prior to getting here, I spoke to Josh and Emily, and really was asking what they were doing, but I also wanted to provide some things for the artists that were interested. So, providing the actual full film of Keith hearing the message. I uploaded my whole thesis. They didn't get to see it, but I'll upload it for y'all so you can see it. But being able to provide, once again, context, because that was going to inform how they were going to embody what we were asking them in a very short amount of time. And within that process of context and content, we're acknowledging the source. So I also feel that we generated a community in a very short time, but what we could also see is that we literally saw with the individuals that we were working with, how they were like, oh, because what we were doing was we realized that this man's work was reflecting what was happening socially. And as we were in the room, Michelle was like, okay, we should make them become the art. What shapes was he creating? So I went back into this space and introduced shapes from his work to be able to introduce the individuals that we were working with to generate the significance of community, so that we had that space of celebration once they arrived at the club, e.g. the church, which is what we felt at the end. So really being able to provide a space for the community, but also for the individual to go down the rabbit hole and really validate themselves in the process.
Yeah, I was just going to add giving people permission to go there, because there's this pause now, I think, where, you need to give folks, it's okay, like I kept telling them, have fun out here, this is a dance that was built in community and really meant to be done in community. So even though we're bringing it to these very performative concert dance spaces, if you can somehow find community within each other, the audience doesn't matter. They're just invited, to join in, and hopefully you do join in, Dwayne and I were yelling, I was hoping somebody was going to yell, you know, because, you know, these are dances that have emotion. And, you know, when you're in a club and you know this, you know, people are yelling constantly. And it's, you know, so like having the permission to release like that. And I just think people are still so guarded, you know. And I know that if we had more time, we would have gotten there because people's personalities started to come out more and more every day. And I will say that, you know, this particular group of dancers are lucky to have Emily and Josh embedded here. And these are people who have also spent a lot of time, you know, so that does help, you know. It makes it easy to come in here and, you know, look like we're geniuses, you know, because they're already kind of in the practice of the dance. And so now it's just about, you know, do they trust us enough to like let go, you know? And it was happening, and it happened even more tonight in the space, you know, than it did in you know, the studio.
Halsey.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you, Dwayne and Michelle. Thank you to all the dancers for your performance.
Thank you, dancers.
Thank you, dancers. If we could we have the cast come up really quick, please?
We'll give you permission.
Come on up. Come on up, y'all.
Don't pretend like you're shy.
I wanted them to come up here to let you know that the momentum has started and that there are people here to continue to generate that. So I wanted you to see them, to know that whatever you experienced this evening, there is a place for it to continue. And I also just wanted to acknowledge them for the trust that they gave us and the respect and the love that they gave us. So thank you all. I just wanted you to identify them. Please say your name.
Rachel.
I'm Emily.
I'm Soraya. I'm Lindsay.
I'm Tyler.
I'm Josh.
I'm Claudia.
I'm Cam.
And I'm Corey.
Thank you. Have a good night.
I also wanted to say thank you, Kim. And also thank you, Rebecca Kowal and the Iowa Dance Department. And once again, this is the beginning of something, so let's keep the momentum going.
Thank you, Michelle and Dwayne, for being here and trusting us.